Great morning. And welcome to, well, this first panel discussion at SOMOS, New York, where our theme is Justice in Action. And this is Community Media, Tech Equity, and Our Democracy in a Digital Age. I'm Michael Max Nobby, the Executive Director of the Participatory Media Network, BronxNet. It's community media, it's digital inclusion, citizen journalism, and we're going to get into, why, with the challenges we're facing today in our society, with threats to democracy and polarization and addictive, toxic feeds, algorithms, there needs to be a discussion of possible resolutions, good policy. This is where the legislative groundwork gets done. So we're going to build a cipher together at Community Media, Tech Equity, and Our Democracy in a Digital Age today, which is hosted by New York State Senator Robert Jackson. And he's truly an exemplar of advocacy in motion. I've seen him in terms of justice in action, advocacy in motion. I've seen him in the streets of the Bronx, with community, building community, staying late at town halls, answering questions, offering guidance. He has walked 150 miles to advocate and raise awareness about, and he's the founder of the Campaign for Fiscal Equity as a New York as an elected, his first elected role as a president of a school board. And he would go on to be elected to the New York City Council, where he sponsored the Small Business Jobs Survival Act. He's fought for justice and equality. And now, as a New York State Senator representing the 31st Senate District, that's my home district, Senator Robert Jackson champions public education, workers' rights, climate justice, gun safety, and more. He is the chair of the Civil Service and Pensions Committee, and he represents this 31st District in the Bronx, but he's advocating across the state on important issues, including education, serving on multiple education committees in our state Senate. And thank you, Senator Robert Jackson, for being an exemplar and for hosting this panel discussion, Community Media, Tech Equity, and Our Democracy in a Digital Age. Please put your hands together for New York State Senator Robert Jackson.
Thank you. After that introduction, I think I'll just sit down. But yeah, I've been involved in all of those things, but the most important thing is about communicating with everybody about what's going on. And so the fastest way to communicate to people in our community, obviously, if they're standing in front of you, you say, hello, how are you doing? And so that's very important. What you're doing is breaking the ice in order to have a conversation. But also, as far as media is the way in order to get through to everyone in the community. And so I say good morning to you, and thank you for being here today. I want to stand by to acknowledge BronxNet for hosting this critical. They say me hosting it. No, they are hosting it. Important, critical conversation, and to express my deep appreciation for the incredible panelists here. Obviously, you have Antoine Haywood from the University of Florida. In fact, I would like for everybody to introduce themselves. That's the most important thing. So let me turn to you for introducing yourself to the audience. Just say hello and tell them who you are. Is that on?
Just give us a mic check.
Check. Oh, there we go. Flip the switch. Always does it. Put a little electricity through there. So good morning, everyone. My name is Antoine Haywood. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Florida College of Journalism and Communications. And it's just a pleasure to be with you today and to talk about the relevance and value of community media in a digital age. That's my specialty. And I'll I'll talk more about this, I guess, when I get into my research, but the work that I do, as you'll see, is informed by 15 years of practice. So yes, I did my dissertation on community media, but all of that is informed and shaped by my practitioner experience. So, but I'm looking forward to the discussion, and thank you for having us. Yeah.
Hi. Can you hear me if I speak like this?
There you go. You may have some people, though.
Okay. Still, thank you. Megan McDermott, Assistant Vice President for Digital Equity at the Connect All office, housed at the Empire State Development Corporation. Connect All office is, in effect, the state broadband office. And it's a pleasure to be with you all today. Thank you so much for coming and being here to join us in this conversation. My purpose today is to share some funding opportunities that we have through Connect All to support digital equity. We'll talk a little bit more about what that is, but in particular, how equity requires the work and the strategies and the values of community media centers. And with that, I would just like to thank Senator Jackson, my colleague Antoine, and also Michael, BronxNet, so much for having us here today.
So they have dedicated their time and expertise to be with us today. And so we gather here because we believe in the power of community media, not as an afterthought, not as a luxury, but as a necessity in a time where disinformation spreads like wildfire. And when I said wildfire, I just think about all of the fires that have occurred out west, and that's not good at all, obviously. And some work tirelessly to distort facts. Community media stands as a force of resistance, and the front line of truth is every borough, in every neighborhood. It is where the people, not corporations, shape the narrative. And our community media centers are more than just cameras and studios. They are incubators of democracy, economic empowerment, and cultural preservation. They are where young minds learn the story and power of storytelling, and where residents become journalists, where history, culture, and justice are documented by those who actually live it. But let's be clear. Media equity is essential to democracy. And if we believe in civic engagement, if we believe in the right of communities to tell their own stories, then we must invest and uplift the community media. Because when we strengthen our local media, we strengthen our democracy. And that's why I pledge my unwavering support for community media centers all over. And I know I'm not alone, because our stories matter. Our voice matters. And the truth of our truth must not be easily erased. And thank you for letting me dive into this important conversation. I'm going to listen and learn myself today, even though I've been involved in walking the walk and talking the talk. Yeah, I walked 150 miles from New York to Albany to fight for education, but not once, but twice. And if I have to do it again to ensure that our children receive an excellent education, then I will walk, and then I will capture all of you in the network in order to walk too, because I know you truly believe in what the truth is. And in the media, community media, the tech equity and our democracy in the digital age is where we're at right now. So with that, Michael, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jackson. Another round of applause for Senator Robert Jackson. You know, he is also an exemplar of health and wellness. He's not only walking 150 miles, he's running marathons, half marathons. He and I run on the Grand Concourse together, Bronx Community College Hall of Fame, Roscoe C. Brown, Run the Bronx 10K, which we're doing in May. You're welcome to join us, a beautiful way to see our great city. And, you know, we essentially are looking at presenting truth as authentic voices, and as opposed to seeing what we're saturated with right now, which is oftentimes scandalized information. If it bleeds, it leads too often, and more. And I think to kind of get us started with terms of reference and to get, dive into this conversation, and again, we're going to build a cipher together. This is participatory media. This is a participatory workshop. Let's get started with Antoine Haywood, PhD. I can sort of...
Oh, sure. Do you want me to? Okay.
You're welcome to come up here.
Okay, yeah.
And thank you for joining us. I know you just flew out from the ACM, Alliance for Community Media West Conference. Yes. Just got in late last night. Round of applause for Antoine Haywood.
So I'm still like waking up, y'all. So like it was like late last night, got in. But yeah, thank you again, Michael Max, for assisting that I be here and making sure that I got here. And again, thank you, Senator Jackson, and I'm so glad to be reconnecting with my friend and colleague Megan. So after all these years, we go back to youth media, some 25 years ago when we started. So, but I just want to share a little bit about my research, and which can, I guess, give us some ideas of this. We talk about the relevance and value of community media in a digital age. That is what I study. It's what I also, I practiced community media for quite some time. And so I want to give you just a little bit, overview of my work. And when I began the journey back in the early 2000s, I worked with youth media, and I caught the bug because I walked into, I was in Atlanta at the time, People TV, and it was the first time that I walked into a space that was predominantly people of color working, working in it was a media production facility. It was very participatory, and I got to start working with youth, and I caught the bug because I saw how it, they were able to come in and empower themselves, and it wasn't just about making a TV show. It was really clear to me, and that's something that I worked in Atlanta for a while, and then worked at PhillyCam in Philadelphia. It's one of the newest public access media centers in the country, and I went on to get my PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. But as I was doing the research, I pivoted to understanding the significance of that participation that happens in these spaces, or I call them, these containers, And so what I do is community engaged research and action. It's devoted to gathering rich qualitative data that helps make this case for why we continue to need this. So community access, and particularly that are tied to public access, educational and government channels, are 60, almost 60 years old. Going back to the 1960s, some can be traced back to the 1950s. But there still is this very, very tangible environment that there's education that flourishes in these spaces. There's social capital that flourishes, that's being built in these spaces. There's literacy that is happening in these spaces. And so I think, I'm all for more data, more research that supports the policy work, the interventions that we need, and also the linkages to make connections to other movements, such as what's happening in the local news initiative space, and also what's happening with digital inclusion. So I just would draw your attention to some of the current recent and current studies that I worked on, community media in a pandemic. So we looked at, you talk about the importance of community media when we have public health crisis and we have natural disasters, And so that research, there's a study that looked at how a BronxNet and a PhillyCam and CMAC, where I was just in Fresno, or Akuku Maui out in Hawaii, how they responded. They provided local news and information, to their communities in a time of need, and also a connectivity and sense of belonging. My dissertation, I focused on the significance of African American community participation in public access television. I worked with Dr. Lee Shaker from Portland State to explore digital entertainment tax models for potentially a new revenue source, not just for community media, but also to support local journalism. And my current work, I am focusing on the relationship between community media centers and the future of local news. And so what's the role that I heard, you mentioned that people can become journalists at these spaces, in these spaces, and the services that are provided for people who are inclined and that want to be civically engaged, to tell authentic stories and present some truth. They can go to a BronxNet and they can get involved and learn and participate in telling these narratives in a way that mainstream media might be missing. And then personally, like where I am back in Florida, I'm focusing also on that. Like I'm a history buff. I love history. I love media history, and so the history of the Black press. And so I'm actually a Floridian, a native Floridian from West Palm Beach, and so I'm doing a lot of work to piece together like those narratives as well, because we know ethnic press and Black press is like very, very deep legacies there that they're lessons that we need right now today to help guide us forward in terms of building up newsrooms that are telling stories in very authentic ways. So that pivots into what is important that I want to share with you, and which is, in all of my research and there's things that I think about. We'll talk more about this in the conversation. But CMCs, I advocate for this as a community engaged action research scholar. CMCs, community media centers, they foster civic literacy and participation, which could be understood and seen as voter encouragement, government transparency. Diverse communities, they also use CMCs to participate in collective learning. They build social capital, make positive contributions to society. So that's a big finding that came out of my dissertation research, and particularly when I was looking at the African American community that I worked with at PhillyCam, and then also the Latinx community that's there. CMCs, they give opportunities for extensive access to essential hyper-local news and information, especially when national disasters strike and public health crises occur. At the conference I was just at out in Fresno, there was a young lady that was at the it was the Pasadena Community Media Center, and she was talking explicitly about how their coverage helped communities in the aftermath of the wildfires that happened out there. And the same thing was in Hawaii. So Maui, so there's 2 points here that are important, is that so when you have these big disasters, of course, like the mainstream comes in and they do all the coverage and you see it on CNN and you see it da-da-da-da. But when all of those trucks and cameras leaves, the community still needs to have a means to communicate, to rebuild, to be connected, to heal, right? To get access to resources. Their power is still out. People still need water, all of that. Where do you go? What's open? What's safe, right? That is a place where community media, that's where it comes in and has the potential. And if it has more support, it could be even bigger. And it can definitely fill that gap, right? And so she was talking just about like how they did that. And the other point that stuck with me is that community media centers, and this is up here too, I talk about like Burlington, is that they're this unique archive of the community's history. And so in Maui, in that case, what got me is that Maui Community Media Center, Akuku, was the place that had images of that community before the fire devastated it. They were the only ones that had all of that. They had footage of it. They had all of the images of what their community was like. So it's thinking also too the value of and this ties to my interest in history, that what community media centers plays as an archive of like the cultural history of a place, and I'm sure BronxNet has a great, history too, that is captured a place. And then a really big thing that I also think a lot about too is the concept that I want to leave with you today is this community media as a form of community care, as this care practice. Again, this gets back to this notion of, shifting the mindset. So at the ACM West conference, we were talking a lot about shifting the mindset. That conversation's been happening for among practitioners for over a decade, for quite some time. But it's really thinking of, going beyond just of like, we are defined by the medium, by the television, by the channels, or yes, that's how community media centers get their primary source of funding. Community radio gets its funding from donors, but when you really look into it, it's like this, there are people in the communities that are coming together, the practitioners who are managing the spaces and making sure equipment and teaching classes and supporting members by hearing their stories and supporting them. It's an act of care, right? And it's something that I've been, exploring further in my research. And there's others who are like working in librarian studies that are also, thinking at like libraries as a places of like care through education and having access to literacy. And community media centers are right in there too. And we can even think of digital inclusion spaces as also that being when people are getting that form of literacy as an act of care. So I think what's needed, and this is I'm going to wrap here, is more identification and growth and strengthening of linkages, which I know Megan was going to talk about more, between CMCs and digital equity programs, public libraries, nonprofit newsrooms. There's a lot of energy in that space with local nonprofit and digital online news right now. That is a bit departure from the legacy journalism, like journalism with a capital J. And so there's a lot of activity there. Community colleges. I think there's very important to pay attention to relationships that we have there, those linkages, and then also local governments, because local control too, as we see, is been under threat for a while. And this is a way that we can help protect some of our assets. Exploring these unconventional operational models for community media centers, creative policy interventions that ensure their healthy futures, and then and also equitable and trust-building local news. So that policy intervention that helps sustain that and nurture that. And then lastly, developing community organizing strategies to build new community media centers from the ground up. So that's something too that I'm thinking of. Like there is a civic media center, which is a radical library, like public library bookshop that's existed in Gainesville, Florida. But we don't have like a version of BronxNet or a Philly Cam where I used to work. But we have these pieces in place. So there's a lot of people that I talk to, and they're like, Antoine, how can we start something up like a Philly Cam or Manhattan neighborhood, whatever, pick your community media center. Like, how can we get, because we have a need out here in this place, and we're in a news desert. We want to get the kids, like help them to start telling their stories, in positive ways using the technology that they have, as they try to become influencers and so on and so forth. How can we do? So that's what I'm thinking, like, how do we creatively think, like in places where we can build up what's existing, but also share the wealth so that we can build new things. I'm thinking of building new, not just like saving what we got, So I think I like that point too of being proactive, with our initiative. So with that, thank you so much, and then I'll pass it over to Megan.
Yes.
Are we going to go? Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Haywood.
Yep.
A round of applause for Dr. Haywood. And, BronxNet and our media and technology studios in the South Bronx was honored to host a tech equity summit called Bronx Forward with the Empire State Development's Connect All, the Knowledge House, and other community stakeholders, where members of the public can come in and talk about what does tech equity look like in the Bronx. And Megan McDermott, as Associate Vice President of Empire State Development's Connect All, Digital Equity, offers so much guidance and has so much knowledge and is so supportive of digital inclusion and digital readiness and raising awareness about the programs of Connect All. So please put your hands together for Associate Vice President of Connect All, Megan McDermott. Up to you. You can go there, whatever you prefer.
If it's all right with you, I'll just.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for that introduction. What I'd love to do is really build on what Antoine has shared, which is that at the end of the day, what drives the value of connectivity, not just for New York State, but for all of us, is the why and the purpose and the community building that makes it meaningful. So Connect All office was stood up a few years ago under the Wired Act. It was enacted by Governor Hochul, and the purpose is really to transform New York State's digital infrastructure. So what that looks like in practice is a shift in what we often call deployment or the hard infrastructure of internet connectivity. But what makes that matter is the adoption. How do you get from what might be available to something that's meaningful in the hands of individuals? And so I think this is where the practice, the actual values of community media centers driving what is participatory, what is self-engaged, what is purposeful, really should be at the foundation of how we define adoption. So for our purposes, digital equity is really about a change in conditions over time. And digital inclusion represents the how. It's the skills, it's the devices, it's the sense of privacy and security in one's hands, and it's also about accessibility. Because again, where we have the theoretical availability of hard infrastructure, if it's not done in a way that's meaningful to individuals and communities to adopt, we haven't really moved the needle. So I think this is, in many ways, the point about the power of history, which is, the value, I'm going to keep using that word, the value here is really about the why. Because where we have connectivity and we have access, if it's not to something that's meaningful, if that narrative is only driven by narrow interests, then we lose ground in the narrative designed to make people engage and self-determine their interests, their agency, and their next steps. So digital equity should be able to address and support educational, employment, civic engagement, health, access outcomes, again, that are relative and meaningful to communities and individuals. So the opportunity ahead that I want to share with you is an open request for applications currently for $15.5 million. That is about the how. It's really designed to support the ecosystem in New York State in recognition, again, to what you're saying, that there are deep, deep roots in what digital equity can and should be, deep roots in community media centers as almost leadership nodes for what an ecosystem should look like, can look like, because as Antoine was sharing, and I think Senator Jackson said this as well, it's not simply about the cameras or the studios. Those matter. It's going to be about the relationships that are formed inside those studios when narratives are made, and how those narratives then become part of community engagement, civic engagement, and certainly youth development, right? Those kinds of outcomes matter. So this is where, most importantly, in thinking about how we have an opportunity to continue sustaining and shaping New York State's digital equity ecosystem, is through the model of community media centers, because of how they're driven, their missions, in terms of what engagement can look like, and the outcomes that matter for participants and for communities at large. So it's your container, and then it's also about rings of impact, right? And so where we have funding opportunities, our purpose is to build those collaborative relationships, to recognize and incentivize partnerships that can then sustain the model. So this funding that I'm referencing is one-time historic funding, but it's the relationships between the participants, between residents, between communities that's going to sustain it. And where we look to that having, again, a design, an approach, a set of values and action would certainly be community media centers, and in the narrative production of what matters to individuals and communities. So I'm sharing that to say that where we talk about these values, we have an opportunity currently for you all to seek and share funding that can then help stabilize and grow what the ecosystem should look like. So while New York State is in a position to drive that, ultimately we rely on your leadership, on your policy interests, on your communities to help inform what that sustainability should look like over time. Otherwise, I worry we go right back to the beginning of an opportunity that we have, but only stands up maybe what is baseline as opposed to what you said before too, like what is new. So we want to recognize in New York State that, again, there are deep, deep roots, decades of work that communities are doing, whether or not the term digital equity is applied. Again, I think the real structure and the depth of those relationships is what informs what digital equity can and should be. So with that, I'll just leave it to your questions.
Yeah, this is a participatory event, and I know that, I can just speak for myself, having been born, raised, and living in the Bronx. And, the president of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, Lisa Soren, and our BronxNet team here, Audrey Duncan and Walter and Garakoa and Chris Kumala, and anyone who's spent time in the Bronx and knows the Bronx is such a beautiful, welcoming place. It's a borough of universals, it's a borough of universities, a borough of parks, and yet over the course of decades, it's been too often misrepresented, sensationalized in Hollywood and in mainstream news, commercial news. The Bronx was and continues to be, to a certain extent, terribly misrepresented. And that was because the Bronx, in part, that was because the Bronx didn't have a media outlet, you know, back, 40 years ago, right? So, I mean, I give tours to people from all over the world sometimes of the Bronx, and we had some folks visiting from France, and they said, hey, we have a saying, c'est le Bronx, which means it's, you can guess, it's effed up, it's, you know, and they said, but you know what, thank you for opening our eyes. This is a beautiful place. It's a welcoming place. There's authentic voices and stories that need to be told, and that's why community leaders, elected officials, community people advocated for the existence of a network like BronxNet. So 30 years ago, we opened our doors to the public, offered experiential learning for middle school, high school, and college students, career-building experiences, workforce training for the public, produced programs by, for, and about the Bronx, encouraged citizen journalists to produce programs. We have a professional team. These are local jobs that are created. There's economic impact. It's fueling the creative economy because the resurgence of places like the Bronx and the Bronx, really, it's the creative community that sort of reawakened people's imaginations to explore this beautiful place that we call home. And it's small business. That's part of the identity of a community. And small business has been terribly impacted, but community media centers like BronxNet spotlight small business, spotlight arts and culture, provide voter literacy information. The local elected races, the only televised debates for most of these local races are on places like BronxNet television, where we have a partnership with the League of Women Voters of New York. So we're interviewing candidates, we're hosting debates in our state-of-the-art studios, and our network operations is on the beautiful campus of Lehman College, and I want to acknowledge Vice President of Finance here, Renee Rotolo, proud to call you a partner for 30 plus years. And that's an example of the linkages as well. Higher education, an academic institution of excellence, partnering with an award-winning community media network. That's what we're talking about, because the students are getting this career-building experience. They're going on to get careers, and I'm talking about students from Lehman College and students from across the Bronx, high schools and colleges in our borough of universities. They're getting this real-world, hands-on experience on state-of-the-art technologies that we've integrated in our spaces, best-in-class technologies for our public and our youth. And they're getting careers in a competitive industry as producers, as assignment desk editors for better reporting about the Bronx, as reporters, journalists, production professionals, engineers, production professionals of all kinds, including award-winning animators. To just take a quick peek of what I'm talking about, let's kind of, by the way, we have our BronxNet Media and Technology Studios in the Bronx is a borough of 1.5 million people, so it's like a big city, right? So we've got 3 studio locations, BronxNet at Lehman College, BronxNet at Mercy University in the East Bronx, and the BronxNet Media and Technology Studios in the South Bronx with immersive media studios, XR production stages, learning labs, innovation labs, and more. Let's take a quick look.
Hero in you, in you, hero in you, in you, hero in you. There's a hero inside yourself. That's the reason that you're running all by yourself. That's the
Public access and community media centers like BronxNet contribute to informed and engaged communities and positive social change every day. Pioneers like George Stoney, and in the Bronx, the Honorable Fernando Ferrer, recognized early on the importance of independent voices and communities representing themselves, activism and accuracy. The Bronx in particular was misrepresented. BronxNet exists in part to correct those misrepresentations and provide access to you so you can tell your story. Your voice, your views, your vision matters.
BronxNet has been a staple in my life. It has given me the passion to really look at my home and look at myself and taking ownership of just looking at life and being a part of something greater than yourself.
Bronx has so much to give. With BronxNet, we need this bill to be passed.
If they see it in our community media, that's what they're gonna believe.
Yes.
The community media is closest to the people. The community media knows the pulse of what's happening.
BronxNet specifically does an incredible job of making sure that our community is informed on the issues that matter. When we're talking about funding media at large, especially local community-driven and community-focused media, it's critically important because we know that places like the South Bronx are facing all kinds of issues, and we have people out there working towards solutions.
You know, I think it's important to note that when we have good things and positive things going on in the district, everyone don't show up. And I'm talking about the media, but every time we need, BronxNet is here and really trying to make sure that they're displaying positive things to our community. So thank you guys for doing a great job.
Enjoyed coming onto BronxNet to share with Bronxites what's going on in the world of government.
I am the voice of the people of the Bronx, and I will not stop. I want to thank BronxNet for accepting every idea I come with to them, and we are for our people.
In the Bronx, our youth and our schools and everything in the Bronx that we get, we have to fight for it.
I think it's important for people in our communities to be able to get information that they would not get from regular television.
Can't touch this. Can't touch this. Can't touch this.
Telling the residents firsthand what's happening out there.
We talk about the Bronx. We talk about it being a borough of opportunities, a global destination. We want to make sure that we create access and opportunity for future generations and the pathway to the middle class, creating local jobs, stimulating our economy, giving young people opportunities like internships that will not lead to jobs, but will lead to careers.
That's what you're going to find out on BronxNet television. That's what you're going to find out on any community media center. Wherever you live in this great nation, you're going to find local information, a wealth of local information, as well as an invitation to participate. And know that BronxNet is here for you, to better yourself, to better your life. BronxNet is your open work. Your voice, your views, your vision matters. And BronxNet has built multimedia platforms, studios, technologies, as well as channels for you to participate, because together we are BronxNet, from the Bronx to the world.
And with that, the floor is open. Any comments? I mean, we're facing challenges as a society, as a democracy right now, with polarization, and even in commercial newsrooms. There's somebody that's sort of like a human algorithm coming in and saying, look, this is what people's watching. They're coming with data, and they're saying, do less of this, do more of the scandal, the blood, the ambulance chasing. So there's a lot of community media centers across the nation right now shutting down completely. There's a lot of great community media partners in this state right now serving the public that are in jeopardy. So this conversation is a little bit about the linkages, about making the connections, and about finding and identifying resolutions together. So the floor is open to you. Anybody have a question, comments? Yes, Lisa Soren, Bronx Chamber of Commerce President. Thank you for joining us.
So this is probably one of the most important access for our small business. I can talk to small businesses because they don't know about marketing or social access. So we really have been working, but there's still such a digital divide in the Bronx, which is hard because how do you access it? So one is, how do we get more information out to the actual businesses that, you hear it all the time, the backbone of the economic vitality of our borough and the city or state. But how do we start closing that gap? And why is it that funding becomes such an issue on something that's so imperative for our borough? There's one district in the Bronx, an assembly district, that has almost 70% of their businesses have no digital platform for that corridor. So it's really disheartening to see that after all these years, never mind the big channels coming, we have you, we depend on you. But I don't understand where's the miscommunication so that we lose funding. People don't understand the importance of the media, and why is there still such a massive digital divide in some areas? So three-parter.
I mean, I'll just say, I'll start us off. One thing is that, this is 21st century community media and public access, right? So that means we're integrating enterprise level technology that is relevant, that is leading edge. It's a labor intensive, capital intensive industry. And we're hiring local people, we're training the workforce, and this is, again, economic impact. So that's a little bit of the challenge is these are underfunded organizations, very often that can't meet the demand. BronxNet right now, we cannot meet the demand for our services because of the constraints that we are facing with really what is a migration from cable to streaming. So there's a huge disruption in the media landscape, and whereas with cable, there is local investment, right? So the cable companies are using the public rights of way to conduct their business, and they give something back, a small amount per subscriber for community access. And that's why networks like PhillyCam and BronxNet and Apollo Media Center in Buffalo and Brick and MNN and North Shore Community Television on Long Island, Strong Island, that's why we are able to serve and exist. But that is threatened as there is a massive migration from, from cable to streaming. It's quote unquote cord cutting because it's not really cord cutting. Essentially what's happening is even the cable companies are offering streaming solutions. So they're saying, yes, go ahead and quote unquote cut the cord and subscribe to this streaming solution. So essentially there is a huge problem for us because it's a small amount per subscriber. And the streaming corporations, which are mostly out of state in New York, well, they're collecting huge revenues in close to $400 billion a year without any local investment, without any local programming. That's just one answer to one of your questions, and we're looking at policy to help update that. Yes. Oh, we do stream. So we are streaming all 6 of our high definition channels. We're multi-platform streaming. We're offering video on demand. Go to BronxNet.tv, subscribe to our newsletter, find out what's going on. But we don't want any barrier to entry. This is a public service. So essentially, wait, hold on one second.
MNN? Oh, Manhattan Neighborhood Network.
No, but
right?
I believe most community media centers are streaming, but we're talking about a different thing right now. What I'm trying to say is that we are streaming, but right now we don't want to have a barrier to entry, so we don't charge any money to see our streams. We offer it as a public service.
Can you talk more? I need to hear, because context, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. Yeah.
So basically, if I produce the show, I want to stream it right there, but it doesn't work like that.
You mean stream it live through the show? Oh, so.
Record it and just stream it right there, and then I would just have, it would just go straight to the community. But no, I'm going to have to shoot it, edit it, submit it to the platform, and then it will go to streaming.
So there.
It will be nicer if we can do the show and streaming it right there.
Yeah, you want to live stream via the platform. So the one thing that it gets complicated with community media centers, it's all in a case by case scenario. So that's I can't speak for the internal structure of what the services that MNN has to offer. It sounds like it's a little challenging, but so where I worked at PhillyCam, we had that, right? So members were able to, there was one show, one program, We Talk Weekly, and that actually I sat in on, and We Talk Weekly started off as what you described was more that traditional of like, they were in the main studio, they had this set, they would shoot it, they would maybe do a little editing to clean it up, they would submit it to our programming director, and then she would schedule it into the time slot, and it would come on at Wednesday at 8 o'clock, all right? So that's like the more traditional. But they bumped it up and actually transitioned over, so Philly Cam as a radio station, WPPM, they set up cameras, we have cameras set in the radio station that are connected to, so when they go live, they're going live on the radio station, but they're also going live straight out to the internet, right? But they had to, again, I think the important part is to hear out what you're saying in terms of, I'm putting like my practitioner hat on, like in the practice of like, this is what community members would like to get. And but we do need that access, that broadband, so get back to broadband connectivity, we need to make sure that we have that pipeline so that we can, that's connected to the community media center that allows us, and then also the money so we can pay somebody who knows how to hook all of that stuff up and train you and support you as you do that, right? We need to have all of that so that it works. So like I said, I can't speak to, I don't know Eminem's situation, but I do know it's possible. Because it does exist. There are examples of it. And I think that's the beauty, too, of where we are today is like we do have examples of this like working. And so it's looking to those things and like learning lessons and sharing the wealth, you know, of setting all of that up and being able to, so that people can have that option of like, I just want to go like straight to stream, record. We Talk Weekly does all that. They record their program so that it plays back, goes live. The other quick thing that I wanted to say is, because this is a part of my research too, so there are over 1,600 community media centers throughout the country. 2/3 of them are small, so they have like operational budgets somewhere around, averages around $450,000 a year. And they have, small time staff, so BronxNet example of something that's on the larger end. Philly Cam is on the like larger end, And I think what we're making a case for is the need for more resources so that we can keep up as like technology changes, as literacy needs evolve too, because it's an important part that I want to also impress upon you is like when we talk about infrastructure, I think about it broadly. It's not just the channel, it's not just the pipe running through the ground, it's the people who make the thing do what it do, as we say. Right, that have the skills, that can connect it and can help teach and support people to use it in a way that like it promotes like a social good, So I think we need all of those resources, but there are most community media centers, as you're saying, and through my research I've learned like they're streaming, but the streaming looks different. The streaming may be like on demand playback, some of them streaming just the live channel, and then you have there are ones that are on Apple TV, that are on Roku, and are on Amazon. The problem, though, on those streaming, so they're on those platforms, it can be tricky to find them. And I think there's another case to be made about like corporate responsibility, about like serving, and I don't know how we do that as a creative policy intervention, but when you go onto Apple TV, that it's clear that this is your local, we don't have like a local section app on Apple TV or Roku where you can like, I'm in the Bronx, I want everything that's just, I want to get Bronx, I want to get this, all of that, what y'all do, I want to get Bronx, right? Where can I do that on that digital platform, right? And so, I mean, I think that we need to, that's something new that we need to push for in this digital ecosystem. Yeah.
And Megan, do you want to add anything to that? I mean, and thank you for participating in your community media network and all who are participating.
I think to the question of why does the digital divide remain and how to engage, there's certainly ongoing funding challenges. There's, I think in particular, the Bronx does this amazing thing where despite circumstance, it continues to grow and thrive and own the terms for which it wants to succeed. And I think the opportunity there is to think through how to take advantage of existing resources and to support those small businesses gaining those skills and that awareness. So right after Sandy, there was this really interesting project in New York City that pulled together, in effect, what are called digital stewards, now often referred to as digital navigators, with small businesses. And the idea was, as Sandy affected the infrastructure, people lost access to critical information. We've heard earlier about wildfires and health crises. So what does it mean to not just have access to a large internet, but to recognize, like cities and communities, there should be smaller internets that are locally stewarded, owned, managed, and run, and that the opportunity there is for stewards, particularly, you talked before about an intergenerational organizing model, right? So that where young people and others from a community are trained to actually implement, manage, and sustain a local internet, then you have opportunities to also pair those local resources with small businesses to think through how they sustain during crisis or advance their marketing, their literacies using the existing infrastructure. So it's a really nice, beautiful, long-term, very labor-intensive, but possible model. And so again, would encourage folks to think where there's this historic funding, how digital navigation and how utility and coordination of local resources helps answer I don't think it answers the deeper question about why a digital divide persists, but I think it's an immediate localized response with community control. And that feels very Bronx to me. So would offer that as an opportunity.
Thank you. And something else that's very Bronx is it's a welcoming borough with emerging communities. So on the BronxNet channels, you'll find authentic voices from these beautiful places from around the world from people, community programming by people who are from those places who now live in the Bronx, multilingual, multicultural content. We have a Yemeni cohort taking training now, Albanian language, as well as Garifuna, not only Spanish and English, but also West African communities producing content in English and in French and more. So that is also something that you'll find on these diverse channels. Yes, you have a question. I saw you. Yes. And you can project.
My name is Jose Luis Rodriguez. I'm the Executive Director of the Caribbean Preparedness and Response. It's a not-for-profit organization using technology to address a very specific issue that impacts our communities, and that is emergency preparedness as a result of a disaster in Puerto Rico or the Caribbean, and also how the diasporas responds to it. First of all, I want to commend Michael McLaren, which I know for a long time, almost since he started. And you're really a true innovator. Not only an innovator, but somebody who has really used this medium in a very important manner.
Thank you.
And also I want to commend Senator Jackson that I would like to see more elected officials involved in issues like this, because our community need it desperately. And part of the problems that we have is that our political leadership are not fully aware as to the benefits and how they can impact this. So I'm very, very encouraged by your presentation today. The presentations that were made, I learned a lot from both of you. And one of the things that I'm interested in pursuing is the models that you said that what we do represent a new model. And I would like to have that conversation later on. And I like also what Ms. McDermott said about your philosophy. It's really very interesting to see somebody in the government really have such a passion and feeling for what we should be doing with this. It's very important. I think here today, the individuals that are involved, that have believe deeply in how to use this medium is key. It's not only the technology, it's what do you do with this and how do you move it forward. One of the things that I'm very concerned, and I want your reaction, is what's going on in Washington. As you know, we're talking about equity here. Well, equity is a bad word in Washington right now. In fact, you put any proposal dealing with equity and inclusion, and I believe it's not going to get found. So how do we, and that's why, Michael, I'm so encouraged by your model. Looking at an alternative, and I understand where you're going with the streaming, looking at alternatives to generate revenue, because I think that's where we need to focus now.
Yeah.
And I think this is where the elected officials need to help us focus so that our communities can get their revenues that it needs to develop the innovative programs that BronxNet is doing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure others out there would like to do as well.
Oh, yeah. Thank
So, the question is, in this environment where Washington is cutting everything, okay, I don't know how your agency is going to be impacted. I heard you said that you mentioned there is funding coming on. Is this funding federal or state? Because anything federal, I believe that is in jeopardy right now. So the question is, again, to pursue what Michael is doing, is how do we develop alternatives of fundraising or developing revenue so that these ideas can really become reality?
Thank you, Jose. Does anybody want to?
Clearly, when you talk about funding in order to promote people involved in the media, and especially young people, we need to be able to communicate how much do you need? What is it for? And put it in the, to try to get it in the budgetary process. So, for example, right now, New York State, when I say we, the Assembly and the Senate are going through what are the priorities of each house. And that is going to be discussed and determined how much we have, and $252 billion, that's what we have, in order to basically fund all of the programs in our state. And so you need to put forward what your vision is of what you need, and then lobby for it and get us involved as elected public officials, because if I'm not involved in media, but I'm practicing running, because basically I'm a runner in some respects, I need to be pushed a little bit in order to know what the priorities are. And so if you sit and be quiet, then I won't know what the priorities are. If you're saying that you need to be able to raise $200,000 or $2 million for networking this in the entire Bronx, then you have to be able to sell it to us. So if we don't know about it, then, how are we going to do it? And so that's right now, I'm going to go back and look and see what, if anything, is being funded to BronxNet or any other media, local media. I'm going to look at that to determine what can I do to help that at this point in time of the budgetary process. So that's what my message to everyone here.
Thank you, Senator.
You had a woman back there.
Oh, there was another, and Antoine.
Can I? Yeah, I wonder if like equity. Can you tell me what you think about that? Like, I mean, we don't have to call it, but we know what it is, right? We can talk about it in the underground, right? We know. But if that's something that that's an organizing force, because I think for a while, just even in like where the networks that I'm in, there's been this like division, and I'm not sure why, but that's somebody's dissertation, somebody else. Between like even with like digital inclusion and like community media, like there's kind of like there's overlap there, and but there's still not this like cohesiveness that's like in a way of like building power through almost like a coalition. And so, and I'm wondering, like, are we in this moment now, because we are all, like, equity is under threat, education is under threat. We know this is rampant anti-intellectualism that just kills me, But for us who are on the ground, who are working to educate the youth, who work, keep ourselves educated, preserve our histories, our narratives, like, we understand the power of all of that, So I think now it's like there's something that, there's the bigger themes. There are these bigger, like there's something that we can galvanize this movement in the underground, if you will, that we can. And are there lessons from like coalitions of past that we can draw upon to like move forward and do what you said and figure out how we start to pool our own money, we start to build in our own ways. We even lifting each other up. Supporting each other, helping each other heal, experience joy in these moments. Like can we do all of that work now, despite what's going on up top in Washington. I mean, I think there's so much noise up there that it may even like distract itself while we back doing what we need to do. You know what I'm saying? Back at you see what I'm saying? Yeah. But we can be back out doing what we need to do while all of that's going back and shooting itself down, you know? So I mean, there's definitely an opportunity for like more, coalition building work that comes out of it. I mean, that's how even Philly Cam came to be. There was through 30 years of like coalition work in Philadelphia. Philly Cam went on the air in 2009. So it's one of the newest like access or operations in the country. But it was that long, work. So that's the thing that's important with all this. I think this is going to be, we in for the long haul. This is slow work here if we're going to shift the narrative, and build for ourselves. But are there lessons in those coalitions that formed, that gave birth to like a Philly Cam, which there was a coalition of grassroots organizations, activists, social justice organizations, independent journalists, right? That then for this unique relationship with the local government, with city council, and people that far, and we have like electeds who are interested in backing this. And so it's like, where can we find power there, to build for our communities while there's all that noise happening up top? You want to add to that?
I do. I want to answer your question directly, and thank you for your comments and your insight and your work. So the New York State Digital Equity Program has $50 million accorded to it. 13 is state appropriation funds, 37 is federal monies. The $37 million is obligated to us under the Digital Equity Act because New York State engaged in a participatory planning process that actually was deeply informed by media makers, public libraries, community colleges, individuals, and also digital equity coalitions. So to your point, in every region of New York State, there is a digital equity coalition currently. They come together under the New York State Digital Equity Network. They are eager and hungry for opportunities to partner on exactly your questions and concerns. And so this is for New York City, but it's also across the state. And I think this is where it's important to note that yes, equity as a word might be contested, but to what Antoine said, it is in the values of the design of our partnerships and our structure that the work continues. And so happily, we have a governor who's also committed to equity in the sense that we have this contribution, we have this office, and we have a mission and an intent to not just drive infrastructure for the sake of it, but to what you said, it's for the purpose and the why of that adoption, right? And so where we can continue to build that and demonstrate need and then also impact, I think we're in an opportunity to continue asking for state commitment, as you're saying, as the federal level continues to churn, we have an opportunity to dig deep and build those relationships to sustain how we define an ecosystem through this funding. So it's not without challenge. I hear you.
Oh, yeah.
There's reason to always keep our head up on what's happening and also continue to build relationships to help us do the work. And so I'd say where you take your questions and your priorities, as Senator Jackson's saying, to the forefront, that also helps the state follow your lead as to what we need to invest in and how we continue to secure those dollars both at the state and federal level. So I will share that there's another state, a large state, that has decided to forego its digital equity monies. For New York, maybe that'll just be more for us, right? We're gonna fight for it.
Courage, strength, empathy. Together we are stronger. Thank you, Megan. I saw two other questions. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm glad that you started talking about coalition building because that was really the nature of my question. And it just seems like, I know in other industries, because I'm not as familiar with this one, you have consortiums across states where they collaborate, where they share information and they share data, which is really significant. And so I feel like part of it, because sometimes when you have these sorts of things, ego get in the way, or I do things this way over here, and I do this over here, but the fact that you have, in this particular case, BronxNet seems to be doing some amazing things. And I thank you for the service, but then you also have other boroughs that seem to not be part of those conversations. And maybe they are, but they're just not here. So I think that part of the lesson, at least that I'm taking away, is the importance of more folks at the table so that you have that strategic planning that's happening across the board, not only on a local level, but also on a statewide, but then a national level as well, so that you'll be able to come together as one unified voice and be able to pass on that information. Because to the extent that you advocate, you need to be able to have data and numbers to show and to back that up. And so if some folks like Brunswick have that, but other folks, like let's say, I think somebody said they're from Manhattan, I'm living in Brooklyn right now, and I'm wondering, well, where's my Brooklyn, community?
BCAT, yeah. Great, yeah.
To the point that taking this opportunity to really do that connection collaboration so that there's that shared resources, of course, the board I think would make a big difference.
Thank you. Last question, and I think go ahead.
I want to piggyback on the small business divide in the media. To everybody knowledge, there are entrepreneurial assistance centers across the state. I'm part of Empire State Development under the Small Business Division. They provide one-on-one technical assistance in business planning and marketing strategies and promoting products or services to these communities. Media is relevant, right? Because it's not for everyone. I'm so glad that I participated here to learn from these media outlet, because it's good to know, right? One of the challenges, like the lady was mentioning, is how to figure out a revenue model, right? The same for the business owner. What is my return of investment, right? If I do an ad with these producers in these shows, right? It's really help us to figure out if it makes sense, right? To get a decent return of investment. And I'm sure also the producers of the media outlet presented, they also struggle to figure out their revenue model, right? So I think just the fact that they're making it accessible is good for small businesses.
Thank you for that insight. And thank you to Senator Jackson and our panelists, Antoine Haywood and Megan McDermott. Thank you for participating today, and let's stay connected because we are stronger together. Enjoy the conference. Keep Bronx strong, Empire State strong. Para siempre.